Muskets cracked through the tree line in one long volley after another, smoke swallowing the field until nobody could tell friend from enemy. "Come on, return fire, load the next round." That order cut through the panic, grin already fixed despite the fear on my men. "Show those Aganians there's no lack of balls here. The gun of a proud soldier of Schwedel is an unrelenting stallion, isn't that right?" "Commander Krombertz, we lost 6 men. 90% of us were still breathing, and somewhere behind my grin I was screaming to run for it. The survivors went forward anyway, on my order. The enemy officer only sneered. "Once the several platoons following us catch up, we'll slaughter you. More than 40 of them still coming." Right then I hated this world so damn much. Buying time. The question surfaced before I could stop it. It's just buying time, in other words, resistance is futile. Every part of that was true, and none of it mattered. The hilt found my hand before I told it to, and the blade was already cutting the air before my mind caught up with what I'd just decided. A soldier's shout of alarm cut through the noise, and something screamed in on us fast enough that half the line didn't even see it coming. "Sir," someone called out right as I clocked the trajectory myself. "Oh shit." There wasn't time for anything smarter than that. Then the shell hit, and the world came apart in fire and dirt around us. The blast left men screaming in the mud, and when I pulled myself upright, my hands wouldn't stop shaking. You saved me, sir." One gasped. "That just got 10 of us." Another said, 30 and a few. It came out flat. A trembling voice asked how I dodged it. "I've had a thing with the Grim Reaper for a long time. This power I'd known since childhood. This blade I call the Grim Reaper's scythe. It saved my life many times. In my past life I was an ordinary Japanese person, and dying once left me able to sense death coming, a cold blade against my neck before danger ever arrives. Then came the order to charge, and I read the enemy gun by its impact. It's a small field gun in that case. A dead run took me ahead of my own line, sword raised, and I felt the words before I said them. "The enemy is out of trump cards, victory is ours." Someone behind me shouted my name in disbelief. No one needed telling twice. "Charge, don't let the commander die, everyone charge." The whole line surged forward behind me into the smoke. Sunlight cut through the smoke right as I steadied myself, plotting my next step. A musket isn't particularly accurate, I reminded myself, not at this range, not in this chaos. Then I spoke to the blade in my hand. "I'm counting on you, Grim Reaper." Trusting the one power that had never once let me down, I walked straight toward the guns aimed at my chest. Bullets tore past as I closed the gap, saber raised, and not one touched me. Their officer barked the order behind their line. "Fire!" With a full rank of Aganian guns leveling on us. Blood sprayed before they got the shot off. Then I screamed straight through it. "Hi-ya! Don't let them reload." I screamed, dragging my men forward as the whole Aganian line surged back at us, screaming their own war cry. Rifles clashed like clubs, bayonets found ribs, and one soldier went down hard under my boot with a blade at his throat. "Kill, kill!" I couldn't stop shouting it. The hillside was littered with both sides, ours and theirs, and our banner hung over what used to be a battle line. "Fuck militarism," I muttered, flicking blood off my blade. A soldier tried to report and coughed blood instead, dying before he finished the sentence. Another stepped up. "Our platoon has about 20 men left, sir. The enemy lost their commander and fled." "You're all heroes of the Imperial Army." I roared, telling them we'd retaken the position, faking every ounce of it. "The pride of the fatherland." The men roared back, and it worked. Without those words, none of them fight again tomorrow. Kneeling by a dying soldier, I heard him rasp. "We did it, sir. You fought bravely." I told him before he called out to his god and went still. Once the field was cleared, I gave the last orders. Bury the enemy too, or the locals would riot, treat our wounded, bury our dead. "Yes, sir." A rider trotted up, reinforcements from the other platoons, arriving late to mop up what we'd finished. I let out a long sigh, then, grinning, "We'll head downtown for drinks and women." The men roared, even I winced at myself. Ah, the vulgarity. This whole empire sat somewhere around my old world's 17th or 18th century. Schwedel was my second homeland now, spires and all, ruled from a throne I'd sworn loyalty to. Its border kept shrinking, worn down by a war 100 years old, squeezed between Agen and Bruges with only 2 uneasy allies left. Reincarnating into a world this bad was insult enough without inheriting someone else's holy war. Back at headquarters, my general read out the citation himself. Second Lieutenant Krombertz of the infantry, your conduct against Agen was splendid. I appoint you staff officer for the 6th Special Duty Brigade. I snapped a salute. Sir, I humbly accept the position. Alone afterward, packing, the wording caught up with me. Brigades in this world were small, temporary, and short-lived. Staff officer, I thought, and special duty. A carriage came rattling up the forest road, for me apparently, with an escort riding alongside it. Inside, straight-backed and painfully proper, I found a woman I didn't recognize waiting on the bench across from me. How are you finding the ride, Second Lieutenant Krombertz? She asked. Ma'am, it is very comfortable. I answered, sitting up so stiff I nearly saluted the upholstery. She used my rank, smiling. Isn't that right, Lieutenant Krombertz? Besides, a promising officer who carries the Empire's future deserves warm support. She said, laughing at how it flustered me. Hee, relax, my business runs the same direction, so I'm just taking you there. That snake crest again, and the armed escort outside. No ordinary noblewoman traveled like that. Unworthy of such words. I said, not that kind of asset. Her crest marked House Rattray, the line that commanded the 5th Division. I've heard you're a fierce commander known as the Grim Reaper. She said. Truth was, that name stuck because so many of my men kept dying under me. Some indeed call me Krombertz the Grim Reaper. I admitted. She brought up the Aganian patrol I'd routed, the field gun I'd taken. You're humble, aren't you? She said, giggling. She listed my record, undefeated in war games since the academy, a fort held against the odds, why I'd made staff officer. The rules were loose, I thought, and whatever I'd survived, I owed to the Grim Reaper in my head. You were always at the top in fencing, right? She asked. Competitions don't compare to actual combat. I said. Her eyes flicked to my saber. Your swordsmanship is unusual. A shrug did the job. Just the unrefined swordsmanship of a commoner. I said, though I'd had the grip custom lengthened for 2 hands, a habit from a kendo club in a life she'd never guess at. Then she asked outright how much I knew about the 6th Special Duty Brigade. Few people still know how to handle a 2-handed sword. She said, that's my advantage, simple as that. Is that so? She said and let the quiet stretch. When the carriage stopped, I caught her questioning someone outside about the commander, and both voices swore they knew nothing at all. Deeper in the trees, she said she believed the 6th Special Duty Brigade would soon stand central to the Imperial Army. Before I could ask more, she stepped out. If you'll excuse me, she said. We shall meet again, she said, and something about the way she said it stuck with me more than anything else she'd asked. Every question ran back through my head, my record, my sword, the brigade, long after she'd gone. Alone in the carriage, I finally let myself slump. The hell was that, I thought, watching her disappear on horseback down the forest road. Huffed, I'm finally here. I muttered, my heel throbbing from the walk after the carriage let me off. Ouch. In the end, I realized I never even got that beauty's name. Ahead through the pines, framed against snow-capped mountains, stood a castle of turrets and steep gray roofs, the 6th Special Duty Brigade headquarters, half buried in trees I hadn't expected to find this deep in the wild. War wouldn't reach this deep in the mountains, I thought, sizing up the castle ahead, beautiful, but built more like a Western manor than anything meant to survive a siege. Then a voice cut through the trees. Heidi, you there? Startled, I turned straight into a young soldier planting herself in front of me. Withdraw immediately, she barked. This place is off limits to civilians, you know. The sentry spun around, still muttering about the carriage that had vanished into the trees. She was built more solidly than I was, and that thought alone sent me reeling. Humongous, I thought, and she stumbled back with a yelp before I said a word. Looks like my coat caused some confusion. I'm Second Lieutenant Krombertz, a staff officer. Have you not been notified of my assignment here?" She snapped a salute so sharp it rattled her braids. "I am Chief Sergeant Hannah Hayden." Then red-faced, "This is my apologies, sir." A chief sergeant at her age, I asked her to lead me to the brigade commander, and when I reached for my own bag, she wouldn't hear of it. I couldn't let a superior officer carry his own luggage. Apparently rank outweighed manners around here. A shout went up somewhere ahead. The gates were opening for the staff officer's arrival, and Hannah staggered under my luggage, hoisting it overhead step by step while I trailed behind, feeling worse by the second about letting her carry it. Beyond the gate, an entire courtyard of soldiers stood at attention. Every one of them was a woman. Whispers trailed us down the hall. Being the assistant to a superior like that would seriously suck, someone murmured, and another wondered if the new commander was some lecherous, sleazy noble. "No, there's no way that's the case. I'm Staff Officer Second Lieutenant Krombertz, arrived following my assignment." At the door, Hannah called out, "I have brought Lieutenant Krombertz." Behind us, someone muttered a single word, "unless." The commander turned to face me, Colonel Ulzer Medisland, head of the 6th Special Duty Brigade. "Greetings, Lieutenant Krombertz, I welcome you." I couldn't answer right away. Something about her stopped me cold. It was her. No, it couldn't be. She must have read the shock on my face and asked, amused, from beneath the brim of that elaborate hat, "Surprised that the brigade commander is a woman." I stood there next to Hannah, trying to decide how much of the truth I was allowed to say out loud. "It's not at all," I answered, though my face said otherwise. Beside me, Hannah muttered, "What the hell is this brigade but Medisland, huh?" I handed over my papers. "This is the reassignment order and my military service record." A female superior hadn't been unusual in my old life. A whole brigade of nothing but women, though that one caught me off guard. "I'll take care of that myself," she said. "Though from the point of public morals, it's a bit. I'd have an orderly handle your chores." A private office and bedroom were waiting. "As you can see, our brigade consists of only women. I want to crush that misunderstanding myself," I said. "It's only natural." She smiled. "Quite the gentleman. You didn't meet a strange woman on your way here." I described her plainly: military coat, a crest shaped like a coiled snake, barely 20, and already giving orders like she owned the carriage. Ulzer guessed it in a heartbeat. Duchess Rattray. She'd nailed it. A woman to be wary of. Rumors of wrongdoing follow her everywhere. She's no soldier, but that 5th Division you just left, she's the one actually running it. She rested her chin on her hand, smiling. "Very nice, I'm taking a liking to you. I am a soldier after all." I blurted, then remembered who actually signed my paycheck. Oops, she flipped through my file. "You've been very honest with me. Krombertz, single huh. Krombertz is your sacred name. Why use it as a last name?" "Abandoned as a child, I never learned my last name, so I took the one the Imperial Church gave me." "I'm sorry," Ulzer said. "Don't worry about it." I told her. She read on. "Accepted into the academy at 15, commissioned 2nd Lieutenant in the infantry straight after." "My first choice was the Paymaster's Corps," I admitted. "But those rear positions go to nobility's heirs." "You disapprove?" Ulzer asked, catching something in my face. Nobles got private tutors, the best scholars money could buy, while commoners weren't even allowed to compete for the same posts. "No," she said. "Their brains cost money. Can't let them die in battle like commoners can." My last life schooling gave me an edge here too, and standing out nearly got me killed. "Their tutoring pays for scholars who can focus on research," I said. "I'm just trying to be rational. You're very understanding, aren't you?" Then she laughed suddenly. "I'm liking you more and more." Sobering, she said. A real career here needs backing from the 5 royal houses, and she was surprised I was still only a 2nd lieutenant. "It's because I'm a commoner," I said, and flicked my hair. The head house," I blurted. "Not just a cadet branch with the same name. Near the end of the line," Ulzer said. "But I'm in the succession, complicates things." Hannah leaned in. "The commander belongs to the ring finger," she whispered. "The head house of the Medisland family. Don't be whispering now, Hannah. I'm sorry. First a duchess in a carriage, now this. She laid it out for me, 5 royal houses, descended from 5 knights who'd conquered this land, ranked like fingers on a hand. House Schwedel, the imperial family itself, was the thumb, ranked first. Zichberg took the index finger second. Mildor was the middle finger third. Ulzur's own house, Med Island, held the ring finger fourth. Last came Rattray, the little finger, ranked fifth. Those 5 houses monopolized every real position, whatever an outsider's record. Even the lowest of them controlled dozens of lesser houses. The current head of my family is my nephew, Ulzur said. 44 years old, I was born to the second wife of the head 2 generations back. I'm 22, so don't get the wrong idea. One classmate had married into nobility and made first lieutenant. Rare, but it happened. Colonel Ulzur asked me for something small. I sometimes find the Med Island name a hindrance in my duties. She said, could you refrain from calling me by my last name too much? I understood why. The 5 royal houses buried people quietly and called it misfortune, and staying invisible had kept me alive this long. I don't want to cause trouble for the head of the family, I told her. Her sacred name turned out to be Nazer. Ulzur Nazer, it rhymed, and she knew exactly how bad that sounded. I asked her straight out in front of Hannah Hayden, and she squirmed, mortified. Then she rounded on me. You abominable parish high priest, you don't have to make it rhyme. My name isn't a poem. Hannah lost it laughing, apologized, and laughed again anyway. Hannah wasn't finished. I have no intention of letting you go, she said. There's no way to make a name for yourself here. Ulzur cut in. You've been tactfully disposed of. A second lieutenant is a second lieutenant. Are you really sure? This brigade is an empty shell. It should have commanded several regiments. It had 1 company, 150 women. That is fine with me, I told her. Ulzur studied me like she expected outrage. You'll be taking care of female soldiers until your retirement, she said. Isn't that humiliating for a male officer? Very damn nice, I thought. This post is the best. Out loud, I gave her nothing but iron. I will fulfill my duty diligently. All the hard work, all the fighting, worth something after all. Someone off to the side stared. Are you serious? Of course. Ulzur smiled, and for once it looked genuine. Be my staff officer, she said. I've been looking for an oddball like you this whole time. I'll request it once again. Her fingers snapped. Looks like I finally hit the jackpot. I answered the only way I knew how, snapping a salute so sharp it hurt. I will serve with utmost devotion. Yes, ma'am. The brigade's tower rose over the courtyard, and I was still riding the high. I'm finally getting lucky, I thought. Ulzur got straight to business. I'll cut to the chase, she said. There's something I'd like to ask of you, given your experience. She studied us both like she couldn't believe it. I don't know how you 2 grew so tall. My neck is killing me. Anything you command, I said. Everyone kept apologizing, and I waved it off. Don't apologize, I said. Turns out commoners in Schwedel run short, women around 150 centimeters, men 160, nobles taller on better food. Hannah and I were the freak exceptions. Just my constitution, she said. I went out of my way for protein. I said. Ulzur wasn't amused. I inherited my short stature from my mother, my father, and his tastes. Let's get back on topic, Ulzur said. First, I want you to instruct the troops. Below the window, her all-female company marched in step. They've completed basic training, she said, but no actual combat experience. I never recruited them meaning to send them into a fight. Then her eyes cut to me. You don't even know your last name, Lieutenant Krombertz, not from a wealthy family. Then what for? I asked. I'm impressed you survived. Ulzur said. I gave her the short version. A drunk for a father, a mother who ran off with another man in the street after that. An old soldier scooped me up and taught me to hustle, barking. Now run, you and her. Whenever a scheme went sideways, years later he told me I'd make a fine officer. The army, he said, was good to men like me. Many former soldiers whose military days were their only glory, Ulzur said, especially the poor. So the academy was that old man's suggestion. I asked. Precisely. I turned it back on her. What if you had been a woman? She counted 2 paths on her fingers, tenant farming for the church or a brothel, since the academy would never have taken her. Oh, I said, there's another one. Become a female line infantry soldier. Alzur said, and sell your life. I watched her study the ranks of soldiers drilling below the window. I wanted to offer them a third way of life. She said quietly, the path of the soldier. Not farm, not brothel. A rifle, a uniform, and a chance to die on her own terms instead of someone else's. It's not a good way of life either, Alzur admitted, but it offers more freedom, better conditions, doctors for the sick and wounded than the others get. Hannah spoke up beside her, ponytail bouncing. If the commander hadn't picked me up, I'd be grinding grain in a mill for the rest of my life. Another soldier nodded. Me too. I'd never once thought about it that way. Nobles used to sneer at me once. Go away, you filthy brat. You lowly punk. Quite impertinent for a commoner. Being born a woman would have kept me out of this uniform entirely, I thought. I admire you, ma'am. I told her every noble I'd known treated commoners like worms, and she built something else instead. Enough with the flattery, Lieutenant Krombertz. She cut in. Her expression clouded for a moment, then she brushed past the question. Sorry, but don't inquire further right now. She told the group. There's something brewing around Duchess Rattray. The political situation is turbulent. Hannah blinked. Oh, anyway, Alzur pressed on. I want to train the soldiers under my command. Hannah frowned. But Your Excellency, you said you had no intention of making this company fight. There's a lot I don't know, Alzur admitted. I'd put the odds at 50-50. My job is preparing for the bad outcome. Hannah pressed her. You can't trust me, ma'am. The question hung unanswered. You and I are the only ones with formal officer training. Alzur told me. Hannah commands 1st platoon. You'll have 3 sergeants under you. I'm not fit to command a platoon. I said. She smirked. Then here's your first task. Alzur said, improve the proficiency of the 1st Women's Infantry Company under the 6th Special Duty Brigade. Yes, ma'am. I snapped off a salute. Outside, drill shouts already echoed across the yard, someone barking. Too slow. At the ranks below, 2 soldiers watched from a distance and traded a look. A brigade with just 2 commissioned officers, huh? Sounds pretty tough. I faced the 1st Women's Infantry Company and made my first move. Your proficiency is far below theirs, your movements are slow, and your morale is worse. I said I was Krombertz, brought in to turn an understrength women's unit into soldiers who could survive. Could 1 year possibly be enough? I promised full training, then warned Hannah Hayden to give the commander the facts. At the dining hall, Hannah carried a sack of black bread, while the others traded stories about officers who had treated them like prey. The last one was quick to touch our butts and breasts. One line soldier said. Hannah asked what I thought of that man. The complaint was ugly, but it explained why a decent officer had become such a rare thing here. I walked in while Hannah was hauling bread, and the room instantly braced for trouble. Miss Hannah, you spoke with him directly. I asked. She called me polite and kind, which made the others stare. Then I took one of her bags anyway. Hannah protested. No need, I can handle it. I had a reason for stepping in, and it was not romance. The sack was brutally heavy, which was exactly why Hannah refused to let it go. I'm looking into necessary equipment like this right now. I told her training mattered, but so did the ability to carry food and ammunition without breaking people first. I said I would request cart funds. 1 or 2 carts could change the company's endurance before a single battle began. After I left, Hannah told the others. He's a little strange, but he's pretty nice, right? The next day I began with reading, writing, and arithmetic. No glamour. I asked who could read the entire dining hall menu, and silence answered me. That was the real obstacle. A soldier who could not read could not reliably follow orders. About 20 women raised their hands, leaving us down by half before the lesson even started. Who can calculate 6 glasses of wine and 4 of ale? I asked. Reading a gun manual and writing a requisition both depended on this. I held up the textbook and made it plain. If you can't calculate, you can't manage equipment. That failure could kill people. Lessons were only one side of it, so I drilled the company in marching and formation changes. Then I sent them running. Hannah asked, "Is this useful for training, sir?" It was. An army that arrived after the enemy had already taken the ground was useless, no matter how neatly it marched. Speed was not decoration. It decided who held the position. I ran beside Hannah and explained why marching speed mattered. You take the position ahead of the enemy and tell them they don't stand a chance. She understood fast. Bayonets favored male soldiers, so I needed every other advantage available, especially speed and maneuver. Hannah kept going after I fell behind while the others watched from the window. Her stamina was already ahead of mine. I stepped in with both hands locked around my saber, and the move sent my opponent flying before anyone could call it a lesson. That was the point of my training. Krombertz, an ordinary officer with an old sword skill, could turn leverage into force. That is not a saber technique I taught you, Krombertz. Ulzer stared, so why had I learned it as a child? Ulzer gave me the answer after watching my stance. You should make the hilt of your command sword longer so you can hold it with both hands. I had learned the technique for a few years as a kid, which made it useful but nowhere near polished. Such talent will become a valuable asset for you, Krombertz. That praise carried weight. I thanked Ulzer and kept the advice in mind, because lengthening my grip would let my whole body drive the blade instead of leaving the work to my arms. Simple fix, serious payoff. Not even nobles learn two-handed swordplay anymore. Ulzer sounded impressed that a commoner had backbone, then promised, "I'll make good use of him." Ulzer watched me leave and admitted, "There's something unusual about his background and skills." She was right to question it because commoners fought with fists, knives, or a cane at most. Two-handed swordplay belonged to armored knights, not boys like me. Then someone called, "Lady Ulzer." The castle suddenly felt less private. The 1st Women's Infantry Company drilled with their muskets while Ulzer studied the results. The girls are orderly and the training so far is excellent. I stood beside her in a proper uniform now, which looked almost too clean for a unit built from hardship. It almost feels a little too good to be true. Ulzer had noticed the same unease. Ulzer looked genuinely pleased, saying the women were better than male soldiers and that teaching them had been the easiest work she had ever done. That was funny in a grim way. I've taken in many impoverished women from Mid-Island territory. Then she smiled at me and said, "Well spotted." I had caught the detail she wanted me to see. Ulzer explained that only women with high aptitude stayed in the infantry, while the rest found work throughout headquarters. There are other jobs besides being a soldier. I understood. As the 6th Special Duty Brigade grew, so did its staff corps, and the kitchens, laundry room, and workshop gave women a way out of poverty without pretending war was kind. Ulzer confirmed that the state would pay for the women, then gave me the real target. The army has no need for a clueless chief of staff. Fair, I told her. I don't care what happens to our national treasury if it won't help the downtrodden on its own. She slid over proposed improvements for the 1st Women's Infantry Company. Now we had a plan. I laid the plan on the table and started stripping waste out of our marching gear. I was Krombertz, trying to turn the 1st Women's Infantry Company into soldiers who could survive a real campaign. Ulzer asked, "New boots and tents." I answered, "We need equipment made for marching." The question was whether the army would accept changes this basic. Ulzer Mid-Island understood that lighter boots helped the women march, then asked what downsizing our guns would cost us. "A shorter barrel loses range," I said, "but the standard musket is too cumbersome for our infantry." I pointed to cavalry guns instead. They were smaller, easier to carry, and only needed one fix before they became useful. I explained the fix with an early rifle bullet from my old life. The hollow rear catches the firing gas, expands, and grips the barrel. Then I proposed spiral grooves inside that barrel. That spin stabilized the bullet in flight, which mattered because a short gun without accuracy was just a lighter way to miss. Ulzer tested my long-range idea while poaching on a noble's private land, then came back wide-eyed. "We can expect about 3 times the accuracy." 3 times was not a cosmetic improvement. It meant the same women could threaten targets that had once been safely out of reach. I only asked, "So, what do you think?" Her answer was a very uncomfortable silence. Watching my rifle stretch our reach to 3 times the usual distance was the kind of advantage that wins wars before the enemy understands the rules changed. If you enjoy the broken mechanics behind moments like this, subscribe. I break down a new one of these every day. I moved to the next problem and requested a new military uniform. Ulzer stared at me and said, "I've already fulfilled your previous request. You still have more." I did. The prototype had a darker jacket, a smaller cap, and none of the decorative nonsense that made standard uniforms expensive before they ever reached a battlefield. The women tried on the prototype, and the fit finally matched bodies the old uniform had ignored. Their excitement was real. Then I explained the darker color concealed blood stains, which stopped the mood cold. "I was only adopting your ideas, Sergeant Major Hayden," I said. Hannah Hayden realized exactly what I had been preparing them for. No one laughed after that. I explained the darker shade made a soldier look smaller and farther away, reducing the enemy's chance of landing a clean shot. The uniform also became shorter, lighter, and cheaper once I removed the oversized cap, Ulzer said. "It feels depressing." She was right. The color reminded me of commuter trains from my previous life, and that memory landed harder than it should have. My old memories were fading piece by piece, even though their knowledge stayed sharp enough to change an army. I pushed that thought aside and asked, "What is happening with the cavalry guns?" Ulzer answered, "I'm having a hard time gathering enough for all of them. The first few would go to our most skilled soldiers. That was still enough to start changing the battlefield." Beside Ulzer, I leaned in and made the price of my new rifle clear. "A good weapon should be hidden from the enemy. You mustn't tell your allies, would you say?" I was Krombertz, a Schwadel officer trying to give my brigade a gun that could change this war. Ulzer offered to pay for every alteration herself. That bought silence, but could either of us keep it? Ulzer called me a scoundrel. "Not as much as you." I shot back. The joke barely covered the danger. If both sides got this rifle, corpses would pile up regardless of uniforms, and the Industrial Revolution had not even begun. "I'll have to be careful with these guns." I admitted a secret weapon was leverage, a copied one was slaughter. At House Rattray's estate, I watched Ulzer face the woman who commanded the 5th Division, Duchess Rattray. "How do you do, Lady Ulzer?" the Duchess asked. Ulzer stiffened. "Don't call me that." The Duchess's reply was simple. "This place is off limits to civilians. Take your leave." Their old resentment needed no explanation. From the doorway, I heard Duchess Rattray dismiss Ulzer's request for an Army headquarters officer. "I requested the Army headquarters, not you." She admitted the 5th Division had done the work, then held that credit over Ulzer with a smile. "Cold as always, Princess." Ulzer's answer landed cleanly. "I despise you, please leave." Then Duchess Rattray revealed what she wanted from Selin, her younger brother. "No one has to die if he renounces his right to succession." Ulzer understood the threat immediately. "You don't plan on eliminating Lord Selin by force, do you?" The Duchess only smiled. "If even that is thwarted, I shall resort to carnage." I heard Ulzer agree to hear her request, and the room suddenly felt much smaller. In the same conversation, I heard the Duchess offer Ulzer a job too ugly for court politics. "Troops from the Principality of Bruges have been prowling near the border." Ulzer asked why the 5th Division was not being deployed. "Our division is sticking to the border with the Kingdom of Agen." Then she named the target. "Bruges Mountain Jaegers, huh?" I watched Ulzer leave after deciding the rumors were true. The 5th Division's generals resisted Duchess Rattray because Selin would eventually replace her. "I won't share a room with a scoundrel who's after my integrity any longer." Hannah Hayden escorted the Duchess out. Before the door closed, Ulzer turned to her. "Then how about Lieutenant Krombertz?" The insult did not end at the door. I heard Duchess Rattray order Hannah Hayden, "Clean this room thoroughly until the smell of her expensive perfume is gone." Ulzer refused to let it pass. "I don't believe we can get along." The Duchess kept smiling. I shall restrain myself around Krombertz. Hannah could only stare. That's taking it too far. I watched Duchess Rattray smile at Ulzer Medisland like she had already won. I figured you were a coarse soldier, but you can put on a good face, can't you? Ulzer snapped back. Don't mess with my subordinates, too. I was Krombertz, staff officer of a brigade about to be pushed into a border war. The question was whether Ulzer could keep us alive while nobles treated us like pieces on their board. I reported the problem plainly. We haven't been able to procure the guns. Ulzer lowered her eyes and answered. Unfortunately, the deployment is unavoidable. Politics had denied us the one weapon upgrade that could have narrowed the gap, yet the order still stood. I accepted it because I had no choice. Boots and clothing would be ready, at least. The delayed guns bothered me because the first prototypes had already exposed their flaws. They were rushed without a lathe, so the finish is inconsistent. I admitted still inspection had caught the defects quickly, which meant the design itself had not failed. Ulzer asked for my staff officer opinion, and I told her I had selected sharpshooters from every platoon to test them first. It was a controlled trial, not a miracle. I studied the route into the Principality of Bruges and laid out the deployment. We'll send 100 soldiers from 2 of our 3 platoons beyond the border. Then Ulzer asked the question nobody liked asking. If this goes smoothly, how many Allied casualties do you anticipate? The enemy's strength was unclear, and I could not pretend our brigade was ready for a clean victory. I gave Ulzer the ugly answer. I believe it's possible our inexperienced brigade will be annihilated. That was not pessimism. It was the cost of sending poorly prepared soldiers against Bruges mountain Jaegers. When I suggested using the 3rd Division, Ulzer understood immediately. Protecting the border with Bruges at the risk of our lives is the 3rd Division's role. We were reinforcements, disposable ones if nobody intervened. Ulzer accepted the reassignment with painful calm. Of course, it's heartbreaking, but I'll gracefully come to terms with it. Then she reminded me why she remained my commander. That's precisely why you're my staff officer. I left her desk with a new duty and called the chief sergeants together. Our mission is to reinforce the stronghold in the border zone. We'll head to Fort Zeffel. I explained why Fort Zeffel mattered. Secondary forts prevent enemy sieges. If Bruges surrounded the stronghold, allies stationed in those forts could strike from outside the encirclement and break the trap. The enemy would need to capture several forts before touching the stronghold, so I gave the women the only useful order. Always keep your guard up and aim to act quickly. After the briefing, the arithmetic of war would not leave me alone. Borders shifted by a few hundred meters, and hundreds of people died for it. What can a mere second lieutenant like me do? I had complained about government turf fights in my previous life, but now I had the 6th Special Duty Brigade to protect. I would sacrifice myself for them if necessary. The thought still hurt. I rode ahead while 100 women of the 6th Special Duty Brigade marched toward the Principality of Bruges, and Duchess Rattray made me carry the responsibility for every one of them. Don't die before more officers join us. She told me a fair demand. I'll see to it. I answered, knowing a border march could turn lethal without warning. 2 days later, I heard Duchess Rattray lay out the problem. Fort Zeffel needed reinforcements, and support troops were being planned for other secondary forts too. This operation is larger than we thought. I said she suspected Duchess Rattray was arranging something, but I had learned one fact the hard way. Someone dies when you fight. I wanted to return by this road with everyone safe, which sounded simple until I remembered that every woman around me carried a gun for the first time in her life. Ulzer Medisland laughed that Bruges might attack us. The girls armed with guns. She said the march held together better than planned. At Fort Zeffel, Captain Dummel, the 3rd Division garrison commander, explained that his troops were supposed to reinforce the fort while our brigade received its own forces. What do we do then? Ulzer asked. I had the answer. We can't wear them out building camp after that march. Put them through combat training instead. I introduced myself to Captain Dummel as Staff Officer Second Lieutenant Krombertz, once an infantry platoon commander in the 5th Division. while he questioned whether the 6th Special Duty Brigade was merely ceremonial. "I can't leave soldiers unable to guard this fort," I said. His skepticism showed. "Our brigade is cream of the crop." I ordered Hannah Hayden's 1st platoon into a tight double-rank formation because a scattered line left every rifleman exposed and wasted the support unit behind them. "1st platoon ready," Hannah shouted. Then I set the drill's rule. The 1st platoon attacks, the 2nd platoon supports. The muskets came level together, and my women dry-fired as one line while Captain Dummel watched the timing instead of dismissing them as a decorative unit. "Fire," Hannah called. The next order came instantly. Mayan shot in the left eye. 2nd platoon initiate aid. That speed was the point. Casualty calls rolled through the drill as Leka and Carla were declared dead, while Judina and Cusi were marked wounded, and Yulin's gun failed. Swift evacuation of casualties. Captain Dummel realized nobody froze. "There is no wasted movement," I heard him say as rifles rotated forward and the line kept its firing readiness. Duchess Rattray turned a routine request into a demand for Selin's removal. I was serving in a brigade caught inside a royal family dispute, and that was the sort of assignment that could bury soldiers before they reached a battlefield. "My family's unit lacks proper manners," she said. "I will have your cooperation." Hannah understood the price immediately. If Selin refused to yield, House Rattray would settle the succession with blood, then use my 6th Special Duty Brigade as proof of its strength. Duchess Rattray smiled at the thought. "Sooner or later, Selin, you will take the reins of the family from me." Duchess Rattray moved straight from succession politics to the border. Bruges troops had appeared near us, and someone needed to put them back in line. Ulzer Medisland answered with a deployment plan. "The 3rd Division will station near the border to provide support." Then I heard the target, Bruges Mountain Jaegers. Ulzer refused to flatter Duchess Rattray, which was brave enough to be expensive. The 5th Division planned to move against Selin, while Hannah got ordered to remove a visitor who had just insulted the commander. Then she spotted the rank. "What about Second Lieutenant Krombertz?" Duchess Rattray decided my rank made me useful, not welcome. She ordered Hannah to escort me after the room was scrubbed clean, because apparently my civilian perfume had become a military emergency. Ulzer watched the exchange coolly. "Seems like we really are incapable of getting along." Duchess Rattray walked away with a smile and left Ulzer holding the insult. Hannah defended the commander, but Ulzer cut her off before loyalty turned into a scene. The real problem was simpler and worse. "Our brigade is still not ready for combat." I arrived with a practical answer nobody liked. We still could not produce enough weapons. Ulzer admitted the politics disgusted her, but the border required us anyway. I accepted the burden. "I'll make sure at least the rest of their equipment is suitable." Duchess Rattray's smile did not make that promise lighter. The standard Imperial muskets were poorly made, and rushing production without a lathe had left defects everywhere. I had selected the best shooters from every platoon to test new weapons, but I warned Ulzer the results would not be final. "That's how things often go in war." She hated hearing it. Fair enough. I studied the border map as Bruges sent 100 mountain Jaegers toward Mildor, and the point was brutally simple. My all-women brigade could be erased before anyone learned the enemy's numbers. "What is your estimation on friendly losses?" I asked. This was why my new post mattered. Could I build a force that survived its first real war? Ulzer Medisland told me Bruges was doing 3rd Division's work, so I saw the answer immediately. "It pains me to say this, but we should let them share our burden." Her eyes widened. "You're thinking of using the 3rd Division." I was. The border was too wide for one brigade, and refusing help would have been pride dressed up as strategy. I gathered the officers and gave them a job with teeth: reinforce Fort Zeffel and keep the enemy from slipping through the border region. Chief Sergeant Roselle, the 3rd Platoon Commander, and Chief Sergeant Midna, the 2nd Platoon Commander, stood ready. "There are several supporting fortifications in the region," I explained. "The outposts are built to stop a siege." I laid out the ugly geometry. Reinforcements from 4 outposts could close around Fort Zeffel, but that only worked if our people reacted before Bruges finished the encirclement. Be on your guard at all times and act swiftly. I told them. Yes, sir, came the answer. A fort did not need to fall to become a death trap. I looked at the dead littering an imagined battlefield and felt the command settle on my shoulders. All I can do is protect the 6th Special Duty Brigade. I thought every few hundred meters of border could cost hundreds of lives, and I was only a second lieutenant. I guess I'm the villain now. The thought landed harder than it should have. At Fort Zeffel, the camp was ready, and I made one rule clear before the women settled among a garrison made entirely of men. If they do anything inappropriate, report it at once. Hannah Hayden snapped upright. Thank you very much, sir. I could intimidate men with a sword. Preventing the problem was cheaper. Hannah called me strange, which was fair. Maybe because I grew up on the streets. I answered, then told her the truth. It's because I'm a reincarnate. Ulzer Medisland cut in before that conversation could become even more awkward. Hannah, feed your company, then get your laundry done. Hannah saluted. Yes, ma'am. I warned Hannah to keep guards posted, wash her hands properly, and never unbutton her uniform outside the tent. Can I write that down? She asked. Fort Zeffel looked like an antique store because it had once been a local lord's castle. Ulzer Medisland gave me no rest. Devise a plan for every possibility here, then brief the soldiers on defensive warfare. I stopped Rania, the brigade soldier I had just helped, as she started thanking me for rescuing her from a peeper. I was Krombertz, a Schwedel officer trying to keep this fort alive long enough to matter, and this was how I learned my women had been dealing with worse. This much is nothing. Rania smiled and promised details later. I needed them. Rania tried to wave it away, but I refused to let that become normal. No one should get used to something like this, even if you are my subordinates. Starting the next day, I told her I would stand guard during bath time myself. It sounded excessive. That was the point. Rania called me a reliable staff officer, which was flattering for about 2 seconds. Your precious hot water will get cold. Tyra, a soldier carrying the rifles, called Rania away before she could explain what had happened. Rania only promised she would tell me later, and her smile made that promise feel suspicious. By Fort Zeffel's second day, I had ordered every tree near the walls cut down. Captain Dummel, Fort Zeffel's garrison commander, reported that his men had followed through, while one of my soldiers asked why I would throw away cover. I am honored. This is exactly what an elite 3rd Division should do. The reason came next. The trees looked like protection until I explained the cost. Our cannon cannot hit its target if its line of sight is blocked, and infantry could reach the wall under that cover. Hannah Hayden, my young chief sergeant, was popular and already carried herself like a leader. Colonel Ulzer Medisland wanted her developed into a senior officer. I had plenty to teach her. The lesson broke when line soldiers burst into the staff room, shouting about cannon-like sounds beyond the mountain. Big trouble, sir. They thought Fort Zeffel was under attack. I checked the walls through my telescope and found no artillery fire at all. They are firing toward the area on the other side of the mountain. Panic spread through the room, so I gave them the ugly version of military life. Fighting wars is our job, you know. I will have you earn your keep even if you complain. Their frightened complaints were loud, but none of them ran. Then I told them a secondary fort on the front line was likely under attack, and the stakes finally had teeth. On Fort Zeffel's 3rd day, Stronghold Command finally sent word that one of the secondary forts had fallen. Strengthen Fort Zeffel's defenses. That was their entire response. Ulzer stood beside me as I absorbed it, then demanded my analysis. Reinforcements were one thing. Strengthening defenses meant someone expected the next blow to land here. I cut through the panic and gave the order nobody wanted to hear. No, assume the secondary fort has already fallen. I was Krombertz, and keeping Fort Zeffel alive meant treating bad news as a battlefield fact before it became a funeral. Stronghold Godot was the 3rd Division's crucial base, so why had the enemy seized a secondary fort first? Ulzer Medisland, the colonel commanding my 6th Special Duty Brigade, pointed out that Stronghold Godot was the 3rd Division's base, but I had already seen the trap. That is precisely why it is worth capturing. If Bruges could use the secondary fort for resupply, our famous discipline meant nothing. Their army was simply moving around us. Ulzer did not soften the diagnosis. Our brigade shall not forsake your subordinates. Even branded a symbolic brigade and a burden, she meant to prove we could fight. Captain Dummel could barely process it, which was fair. A political unit volunteering for a real siege was not supposed to happen, and Ulzer looked far too pleased about it. Artillery kept hammering the distance, and I laid out the real danger. The enemy must be using the captured secondary fort as a foothold. Fort Zeffel was now under siege by numbers, not just gunfire. Captain Dummel ordered the 6th Special Duty Brigade onto guard duty in pairs while I turned toward the recruits. They needed instruction, immediately. I faced the recruits and gave them the lesson war had been saving for them. The enemy will teach you how to defend a fort. The tuition is in laid balls, so don't forget to pay up. Silence, terrible silence. I called it a classic battlefield joke, but the recruits saluted anyway, and Hannah Hayden looked like she had just watched a firing squad applaud. Ulzer studied the map while I wondered what the recruits had been staring at during my flawless joke. She had received a confidential message from Duchess Rattray, head of House Rattray, ordering us to defend Fort Zeffel at all costs. Captain Dummel's cannons were light, but their mobility gave the fort one useful edge against the stronghold. I finally asked the question underneath every order. Just how many strings are being pulled? Ulzer was one of the 5 royal houses' most capable figures, but she was a politician, not a soldier, and she wanted 5th Division reinforcements from Duchess Rattray. Her answer was blunt. It is too late to withdraw now. So I began planning a delaying battle. The fort itself gave me the numbers. Its walls were structurally weak against artillery, and enemy guns plus infantry would turn every defensive corner into a coffin. We could man the gun ports, but only for so long. Artillery. The word hit as the bombardment intensified, and I understood exactly how narrow our margin had become. I lifted my teacup as an enemy shell burst beyond Fort Zeffel's walls. I was Krombertz, and I had chosen the closest spot to the bombardment because a risky plan only works when its commander risks it too. This siege would prove whether I could turn their fire against them. What does that bombardment mean? Could I make them shoot themselves blind? Captain Dummel stormed over, furious that I was treating enemy artillery like a picnic. What are you thinking? Call him back. He snapped while I watched the impacts land on either side of the fort. This is bracketing, I told him. Their guns are walking shots around one fixed point. The danger was real, so was the tell. Captain Dummel demanded, "Are you listening? What on earth are you doing?" I kept my hand raised and answered, "The enemy is inexperienced in artillery." With bracketing, they fired short and long around the same aim point, then narrowed the gap toward the target. It was the best accuracy method they had. They just had not reached that part yet. That was the catch. No corrective fire came at all, which meant the shells were not a disciplined bracket, but an inconvenient barrage with no one adjusting the guns. Lightning strikes are different, I said. This is a bombardment that needs attention. Captain Dummel studied me. You are in the infantry, aren't you? I had dabbled in artillery fundamentals. The firing kept rattling the walls as I faced the women of the 6th Special Duty Brigade. Are you not afraid of this artillery fire? A line soldier asked. I had never seen anyone as reckless as myself, and that frightened me more than the shells. The grim Reaper's scythe gave me a warning I could trust, although I still did not understand why. Captain Dummel went quiet, then looked at the troops I was calming and understood the point. As long as the bombardment continues, the enemy will not send infantry. I said, we wait for reinforcements. He studied me with new suspicion. You're that Krombertz, the Grim Reaper. I only smiled when he accused me of enjoying the battlefield. Captain Dummel said, someone from your cohort in our division has been spreading rumors. I answered, I understand I am no ordinary person. Do things your way. I thanked him, still holding tea while artillery flashed behind us, then asked what rumors he meant. Captain Dummel pointed toward the rooftop. Look, that Schwadel officer is enjoying tea up there. Across the fort, cannon crews rushed to reload while bodies piled in the corridors beneath them. They cursed at the lone officer who kept waving from the rooftop and shouted for the guns to blow me up. I had made their artillery crews chase one man instead of protect their own soldiers. That was exactly the pressure I wanted. I watched the Aganian cannon crew shove every correction farther right while their shots still missed Fort Zeffel. I was Krombertz, and I had to prove whether this barrage was dangerous or merely loud. A cannon's aim shifted with powder, wind, and temperature. Their aim should have settled. It never did, so why were they still firing? Then I saw the answer inside their own battery. An Aganian soldier crept between the gunpowder barrels with explosives strapped to his chest, and the crew only noticed when his fuse was already burning. "This place is packed with gunpowder barrels, don't shoot." One of them shouted too late. Their panic had finally found a target. I saw the infiltrator grin beneath his helmet and choose the only contest that mattered. "Let's see who can fly the highest." He struck the fuse against a barrel. The artillery battery vanished in one violent blast because stacked powder does not care whose side lit it. Their guns were finished. Afterward, I sat with Duchess Rattray, the head of House Rattray, while she calmly drank tea within sight of the smoking fort. "This ranks around second-grade dilemma quality." She said. I could only stare. "Would you consider moving somewhere safer?" The woman judged government tea while artillery was still falling. The explosion kept chewing through the enemy position, but I told Hannah Hayden, the young chief sergeant beside me, not to lose her nerve. "You never know what might happen on the battlefield. A bit of boldness is necessary." Duchess Rattray and I stayed seated as the fort burned across the valley. That was not bravery, it was calculation. Hannah finally demanded an explanation, and Ulzer Medailan, the colonel commanding the 6th Special Duty Brigade, read the silence around my saber. "So this is why the Grim Reaper's scythe was keeping quiet." I told them the ammunition had exploded because something triggered it, which meant Stronghold Godot's artillery could no longer protect the enemy. With the bombardment gone, I asked Ulzer how she would defend a siege. "We should organize our defensive positions immediately after assessing the damage to the fort." She answered, then Ulzer took control. "Hannah, the 1st platoon secures the guard tower's gun ports. The 2nd platoon scouts for enemies on the walls." The real siege was beginning. Ulzer's confidence pulled Hannah upright. "Let us show them that we're not just decorative dolls." Ulzer said. Before I could move, she stopped me. "As my staff officer, stay by my side to offer your counsel." Then her composure slipped for one breath. "Please inform me if my behavior seems odd. I'm pushing myself." I headed for the garrison while Duchess Rattray stayed behind, and this was where my real job began. Krombertz had to turn a frightened fort into soldiers who could fire when it counted. She told me, "Please return as soon as possible." Then she touched her cheek and added, "I'll feel uneasy on my own." A good excuse. Could I make this lot stand their ground? I walked up behind the Schwedel soldiers and asked, "Gentlemen, how's it going?" They looked like they would bolt if anyone pointed at them. One stammered, "Why, you were having tea on the rooftop earlier." So I told them, "You're supposed to relax during break time. The weather's really nice." Their faces were priceless. I asked the garrison, "Are you afraid of the enemy, folks?" They admitted the Aganians were too far away for reliable shots. "Fair concern," I answered. "Fearing the enemy is proof you're a good soldier." Then I pushed the point further. Stronghold Godot had already made the enemy cautious, because even a scary enemy could be afraid too. The soldiers wanted proof, so I gave them a story with enough weight to carry their fear. Just when they thought it was over, the renowned garrison of Fort Zeffel rushed in as reinforcements. I called them the link between Stronghold Godot and the imperial capital, then promised, "You'll be the laughingstock of the entire army." They finally started shouting back. I told them, "With your capabilities, I trust you won't let them die, right?" The women in the 6th Special Duty Brigade had become soldiers through circumstances, not some noble fantasy, which made their resolve more useful than pretty speeches. When I ordered the sergeant to match our shooting orders, I added, "Inflict significant losses with the initial strike." Their answer came loud. The Aganian scouts kept advancing, and the garrison was ready to celebrate before a shot had been fired. I stopped them. Not yet, Duchess Rattray asked. Isn't it about time? I answered. No, not yet. In turn, we'll be firing from above. That height narrowed the range where our fire could hurt them, while every Aganian shot had to climb. I explained that the Aganian reconnaissance was measuring our artillery accuracy, our gunfire density, and how well infantry and artillery worked together. Duchess Rattray understood. I see, so it's different from fighting on flat terrain. I said, we should have them bring back information that'll make them hesitate to attack Fort Zeffel. Her response named the price. We will inflict significant losses. When the Aganians reached 50 meters, then 60, I finally called it. Now, they had entered the narrow range where firing down from Fort Zeffel worked, and there was no useful cover left for them. Duchess Rattray took command. Prepare for concentrated fire. Each unit take aim at the nearest target. Muskets leveled. Fire. I held my ground at Fort Zeffel while our muskets erupted together and the Aganians dropped across the snow. I was Krombertz, trying to turn one fortified position into a wall the enemy could not simply walk through. Their charge had met disciplined volleys. Certain losses, one condition cleared. Duchess Rattray kept the firing line moving before fear could settle into the gaps between shots. Volley fire the next round, switch to the next gun. That mattered because a musket line died the instant soldiers stopped treating reloads as a shared rhythm. 6 Aganians fell. The survivors finally ran. Once the shooting stopped, I ordered everyone to clean their barrels and conserve ammunition. No, we are not firing again yet. I had seen the line perform under pressure, which was better than training ever could be, but the enemy had not become harmless just because they retreated. Their confidence had changed, so had ours. Lila, a Schwedel soldier testing the new firearm, reported that its bullets flew straight without wobbling, and that she had dropped a distant target with 2 shots. This gun is really something else, sir. The shorter design gave infantry a weapon they could actually control, and her accuracy confirmed the point better than any blueprint. Lila saluted with the gun held upright, then placed it back in my care. Don't lose it, okay. I told the company they had fought like experienced soldiers in their first battle, but I did not let the praise soften the warning. The enemy will be back any moment now. Nobody mistook that for ceremony. I judged that the Aganians would return with a full assault after taking time to prepare, because our volley had hurt their reconnaissance force badly enough to demand an answer. The real battle will begin next. Their first target would likely be the fort's weakest structure, and I expected artillery behind it. We had cannons too. I mapped the attack from the walls. The Aganians would come early, face west, and keep the sun behind them. The eastern side has no guard tower. Duchess Rattray understood immediately that we needed guards against a surprise attack, while I told her to rest. She was a vital lifeline for our brigade. I walked the fort with the Duchess and inspected the masonry myself. A Schwedel soldier pointed out that the guard tower used stone unlike the rest of Fort Zeffel, despite this region having no shortage of stone. I pressed my hand to the wall. I see. The difference was too deliberate to ignore. I stepped toward the guard tower and took its command. I was Krombertz, an officer trying to hold Fort Zeffel against Bruges, and this defense would prove whether planning could beat a prepared army. The lieutenant offered surrender or a retreat, but I chose the exposed eastern side. I'll take command from the guard tower. Could its cannon cover the gap? The lieutenant refused to sit safely behind stone while Captain Dummel, Fort Zeffel's garrison commander, intercepted Bruges' main force. I could not argue with that. Don't die just yet, got it. She told me. I adjusted my cap and gave her the only answer I had. I'll try not to. At the tower, Captain Dummel greeted me beside the cannon he had moved during the night. That mattered. The western tower had 5 guns, but only this one could fire directly into the eastern approach. We managed it in time somehow. He said, I answered. Captain Dummel. The fort finally had 1 clean shot. Captain Dummel showed me the problem plainly. The other guns could not depress far enough once Bruges closed in, and this height made a single cannon a brutal limitation. Still, his artillery crew was trained, and the guard infantry stood ready. Please witness how fiercely they struggle. He said their confidence was real, so was the bottleneck. I looked over Dummel's eager crew and stayed unconvinced. I'm not convinced, I admitted while their tension practically filled the tower. Then the air changed. Fife and drums carried over the hills, and the sound reached us before the soldiers did. They are here, I said. Bruges' army had begun its march. Bruges' formation emerged from the forest in disciplined ranks, filling the road beneath the morning sun. Captain Dummel wanted the order. Captain, sir, shall we get started? I watched the distance close and gave him my approval. Sounds good. Then he roared at his men. Let's show those country bumpkins how to wage war. I watched the cannon crew aim past Bruges' center, toward the enemy's left flank and rear rank. That target mattered because a hit there could tear into soldiers who expected the fort to shoot straight ahead. Captain Dummel gave the order. Open fire. The cannon answered at once, no more waiting. The shot tore into Bruges' ranks in a burst of smoke and dirt, but Captain Dummel did not admire it for a second. He saw the miss and corrected it immediately. 3 right, 1 up. The crew repeated the adjustment while the barrels shook from recoil. One cannon had to make every shell count. I leaned over Fort Zeffel's wall as Captain Dummel's cannon bracketed the marching unit with 2 precise shots. I was Krombertz, commanding Schwedel's defense, and this battle would come down to whether disciplined range finding could expose the enemy's real plan before they reached us. Fire, Dummel ordered. The fife and drums kept playing. Why were they so calm? Our second salvo swallowed the musicians, and I watched the smoke clear with a brief, ugly satisfaction. Got them, a Schwedel soldier shouted. Then another voice caught the detail that mattered. Captain, there's a fife and drum corps in the rear as well. I understood it immediately. The unit we hit had been decoy bait, positioned beyond a field gun's useful range. I watched the deception pay off as Bruges' infantry closed on the wall, while our cannon kept firing at empty distance. Continue firing at their rear line. Captain Dummel yelled. He needed to sever their coordination, but the wall's angle made our other guns nearly useless against troops directly below. I chose the only answer left. All right, a musket firefight it is. Captain Dummel stared at the tower's 10 gun ports and demanded, how are we supposed to fight that with only 10 gun ports? He had a point, I answered anyway. We don't need to wipe out the enemy, we just have to keep them outside the walls. I reached for Grim Reaper's scythe, my saber tied to the death sense that had carried me this far. I saw the incoming fire before anyone could settle into the musket plan. Get down, I shouted. A Schwedel soldier pointed through the smoke. There are gunners among the infantry. Their shots tore into the wall and forced my men to the floor. The enemy had just turned a safe height advantage into a killing zone. I watched one of Bruges' soldiers raise a compact cannon by hand, and the answer finally showed itself. Hand cannons, I said. Portable cannons built for breaking material could fire farther and hit harder than any musket we carried. That was why their infantry could threaten a wall. All posts, damage report at once. Captain Dummel ordered. I got the report while the hand cannons kept us pinned. 3 casualties among 30 infantrymen. The cannon is intact. Captain Dummel's answer came fast. Switch the grape shot. Our field gun blasted a spread into Bruges' advancing line, but their return fire still forced my soldiers to shoot through smoke and incoming rounds. No clean answer existed anymore. I heard the range call and felt the situation tighten around us. The enemy is closing in to within 50 meters. A Schwedel soldier warned. Captain Dummel barked. Enough, stay hidden and just stick out your guns to shoot. I saw the men obey, then saw the flaw. This is bad, I said. Our firepower is totally matched. I stepped into the courtyard alive, and an officer acknowledged I had returned as promised. That promise had bought me more than survival. I was Krombertz, a Schwedel officer who sensed death coming, and I chose the dangerous post beside my superior. If I died, it would be at your side. What was I walking into? I showed them why the castle walls were already failing us. The Aganians had reached their base, and every murder hole gave them another way to fire inward. We lacked the troops to cover that maze properly. We've taken a bold strategy. It was bold because I had chosen to stop defending every wall. I explained that the fortress had begun as one guard tower, with the rest built around it later. That made the layout flawed but useful. A small force can defend the central keep. Even if the outer castle fell and the gate was breached, that tower still gave us somewhere to make them pay. I proposed gathering our people in Glard Tower instead of wasting them at the gate. Its old-fashioned construction was exactly why it mattered. An officer challenged the order, so I made the line clear. Everything except the guard tower can be abandoned. The gate was bait now, nothing more. I watched the gate hold for the moment while smoke and gunfire gathered beyond it. Hannah Hayden, my chief sergeant, understood the assignment immediately. We should welcome them with lead bullets. If the enemy forced that entrance, their victory would last exactly as long as it took us to pull the trigger. I watched our soldiers rush inside as musket fire cracked outside the gate. Captain Dummel tried to sound relieved, but smoke clung to his uniform and the cost was written all over him. Yeah, but we lost a couple men. I had saved a position. I had not saved everyone. I made the men wait while the enemy crowded the gate and exposed themselves to our line. Timing was the whole weapon. Fire. Our muskets answered through the smoke, and the opening became lethal before the Aganians could understand why. Good, one more shot. I had finally made their advance work for us. I watched the Aganians force the smoking gate open and rush through it anyway. Their officer drove them forward with no hesitation. It's open, go, go, go. Boots thundered over the threshold as the column kept pushing. Keep pushing, push. They believed they had broken our defense. They had entered it. I gave the order and watched the Aganians press between Fort Zephel's tents, their boots already losing all rhythm. Krombertz had turned a shrinking defense into a trap, and that made every frightened step worth watching. Keep moving. They shouted. Would anyone notice who was actually steering this retreat? The tents jammed the narrow route, leaving the Aganians tangled together with nowhere to form a proper line. I raised my hand and gave the only order that mattered. Now, I said, one volley would not save Fort Zephel by itself. It would make that crowd panic at exactly the wrong moment. Fire. Muzzle flashes tore across the camp as my defenders fired into the tents, and the cloth that had slowed the Aganians now left them nowhere clean to move. The barricade did the real work. Fire, I ordered while shots shredded the canvas from above. I watched the gunpowder barrel flare beneath the tents while the enemy begged to fall back. They had finally understood the danger, far too late. It's too late, I said as the first blast tore through the packed camp and sent my own soldiers scrambling from the shock. The buried charge erupted and tore stone and fire across the packed ground, throwing the Aganians away from Fort Zephel's wall. That was the price of letting them enter. An Aganian officer cried before the thunder swallowed every other sound. Flame climbed through the rubble, stones rained down, and the men who had rushed our gate were left crawling among the wreckage. Even our own line froze at the scale of it. What the? A Schwedel soldier breathed. The fort's wall had not merely been breached, it had been blown open. The smoke cleared and I saw an entire hole burned through the wall while the surviving troops stared at it. Captain Dummel, Fort Zephel's garrison commander, could only gape. The historic fortress gate has stood majestically for 100 years. Bravo, I replied. That was a truly historic and majestic explosion. Beside the remaining powder barrels, Captain Dummel finally found his voice. Lieutenant, you used way too much gunpowder. We had more than we could ever carry to the guard tower anyway. I said, and he rubbed his temples. As captain of the fort, I cannot go around sharing its secrets. I stood beside the flames after I destroyed the gate, apologizing to Ulzer Medisland, my colonel, without meaning a word of it. I was Krombertz, a Schwedel officer, and this defense worked because their oil and ammunition burned with the gate instead of coming back against us. My apologies, at least their ammunition won't fall into enemy hands now. Would they still charge? Ulzer finally understood why the Aganians called me the Grim Reaper. I had turned their own fuel into a wall they could not cross, and as long as it burned, their route stayed locked down. She called it a nightmare. I only smiled and said, I have no idea what you mean. Smoke rolled over the fort. Through the smoke, I watched the Aganian infantry gather itself and move again. They had enough nerve to charge after losing the gate. Ulzer Medailan, the colonel commanding my brigade, watched them come and said, "Quite admirable of them to charge so soon." Their answer to my trap was still an attack. I heard the Aganian officer order another volley, convinced our broken defenses had made us helpless. "Fire, not a single one gets inside." His soldiers rushed beneath the walls anyway. That was the mistake. Cover only mattered if the wall stayed standing, and their musket fire could no longer decide where the battlefield ended. The Aganians aimed straight at the fortress walls, so their officer doubled down. "Fire at the walls." Cannons answered and the stonework shuddered under the hits. It sounded like pressure, not victory. Their shots had finally started tearing apart the cover they were relying on, which made the men below it the ones in danger. Then the wall gave way. The stones the Aganians had shaken loose crashed down among their own advancing ranks, turning a firing position into a rubble trap. "What the hell?" one of them cried. Ulzer did not flinch. I had made the wall part of the weapon, and the enemy had supplied the force to fire it. Ulzer reminded me that I had been ordered to delay the enemy, not erase half their approach. Fair. The rubble field now blocked the route far better than an intact wall could have. She looked across it and said, "Don't you think this is a bit much?" I had to admit it was a little excessive. Ulzer agreed the defense looked excessive, but she knew why it worked. The more damage I made the Aganians take before reaching us, the weaker every later attack became. I put it plainly. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. That was what the Imperial Military Academy had drilled into us. Crush the attackers early, before they could choose the fight. I pointed toward the walls and asked Ulzer Medailan, "Then why not rig them with explosives?" I was Krombertz, holding Stronghold Godot with a defense meant to make every enemy advance hurt. "Your ideas are even more ruthless than mine," she said. "Tell me, Lieutenant, what happens next? Could Bruges still find a way out?" Ulzer asked, "What happens next?" I told her. "The enemy commander is probably deciding the sunk cost right now. If Bruges paid dearly to take Stronghold Godot, their commander would have to answer for it. That was why they had come too far to back down. The Bruges army expected a cleanup. Instead, our resistance bled them and the fort remained. They might cut this short or play it safe to limit their losses. I said either choice protected their commander from more disgrace, because they could no longer raid our supplies. With the enemy penned outside, I told Ulzer our skirmishers could keep the line safe for a while. "I'm going to grab some breakfast." She stared at the enemy around us. "In this situation," I only smiled. "That's life in a siege battle. From now on, we eat and sleep under siege." I headed through the gate while Ulzer watched from behind. "Phew, well, I suppose I'll take it easy too," she said. Then the first day of the siege began in earnest. Rubble crashed below the walls as our troops moved through the breach. "Now go," a Schwedel soldier shouted. The cannon finally rolled into view, and I heard the order race along our wall. "Head for the east wall." The target mattered because a working cannon could pound our position from safety. Then its barrel flew loose. "Shit, it's broken. Get back and report now." A Schwedel soldier sent the crew running. One intruder breached close enough that I saw a Schwedel soldier raise a musket and drop him. "Stay on high alert," Ulzer ordered. The report came back quickly. "All intruders have been eliminated." I gripped my weapon and answered, "Good, the stalemate is going just as planned." As long as Glard Tower held, time belonged to us. By the second day, I could read the siege in every face. "Did you get any sleep?" I asked. "Not really," came the answer. Men and women trapped behind the walls could barely rest, and some could not eat at all. The stalemate was still holding, so were we, barely. I fired from Glard Tower while enemy rounds chewed at the wall below us. I was Krombertz, holding a siege together with exhausted women and weapons that took too long to reload. Hannah Hayden yelled, "Hold them off." Could our thin defense last until help arrived? The attackers kept coming, and I answered, "I'm on it." Hannah wrestled with her damaged gun, muttering, "This gun is harder to use than a bow, but I managed." Rania turned toward the firing line and called, "We must protect the colonel at all costs." That was brave, but it also exposed the real problem. Our shots were slowing the enemy, not stopping them. The Aganians were launching an all-out assault on Glard Tower, using the rubble as cover while they pushed toward the courtyard. One officer warned, "If they blast through the door with their hand cannons, we won't be able to stop them." I watched the pressure build and thought something was wrong. They were spending lives far too freely. I told the officers, "We just need to buy as much time as possible and keep them from breaking through." Then the obvious question hit them. Why force a frontal attack when artillery should have won already? The answer was still out of reach, but their sudden rush had stopped being reckless. It looked deliberate. Then the firing ceased. Hannah shouted, "They are retreating." The enemy had stopped their attack, and for one breath the tower finally went quiet. Orders followed from their ranks. "All units fall back." I didn't mistake that retreat for mercy. An army that abandons a push this expensive usually expects something better to arrive. From the wall, I saw the answer moving through the eastern forest. "Cavalry is coming from the east." I said. An infantry unit marched behind them, enough bodies to turn our narrow defense into a trap if they reached the tower together. The shape of their formation told me exactly who had come. Just as I thought. The riders burst from the trees in full formation, with infantry pouring down the path behind them. Someone recognized their banners and cried, "It's the Schwedel Imperial Relief Force." Relief had reached Glard Tower at last. Better still, these were organized troops, not another handful of defenders being asked to survive on stubbornness alone. Rania sagged with relief and said, "Few were saved." I checked the marching tune through my scope and gave her the answer. "The 5th Division." Hannah asked, "Are you sure?" Their music carried the same arrogant certainty as their troops. "It's definitely them." The rescue force had arrived, and its identity mattered. I turned toward the wreckage as the relief force rode in, and the defenders around me cried, "We did it, we're saved." I was Krombertz holding Glard Tower for Schwedel, and their arrival bought us breathing room, nothing more. They must have rushed the fortress when they spotted our reinforcements. I thought, had the 5th Division come to save us or claim the next fight? Beside me, Duchess Rattray, head of House Rattray, read the disappointment I had tried to hide. "Your face says it all. You look like you wanted a longer fight." I shook my head. "No, really, I swear. I'm just a commoner officer who wants to earn my paycheck the easy way." She did not look convinced. "Is that so?" Duchess Rattray asked. "No, really, I swear." I answered, though my excuse was already looking thin. Then an entire cavalry line came pounding through the smoke. I watched the riders arrive in formation and muttered, "I want nothing to do with war." Seriously, that had been my position. The cavalry swept past in a wall of horses, uniforms, and the snake crest of House Rattray. That mattered. "Good thing they're on our side," I said. "A cavalry charge with hundreds of riders, that gives me chills." Once I saw the banners, I gave Duchess Rattray the answer she wanted. "I've confirmed their banners. It's definitely the 5th Division." I raised a hand to my cap and gave Hannah Hayden an order. "All right, let's go greet the officers of the 5th Division. You're coming too." "Understood," Hannah answered. Duchess Rattray only smiled. They swooped in and took all the glory in the end. Then she added, "Well, from here on, it's my job." I followed her into the ruined fort, wishing I could see my old unit again. I faced the shattered fortress beside the 5th Division's soldiers, with rubble piled where its defenses had been. One Schwedel soldier looked over the destruction and said, "This is quite an intense way to fight." Another struggled for words. "This is, how should I put it?" The damage spoke before anyone finished that sentence. Ulzer Medisland stood with Hannah and me when Captain Dummel, Fort Zeffel's 3rd Division commander, addressed us. "It seems the enemy's attack was quite fierce. I'm relieved you made it through safely." His praise became an assignment fast. "Our engineers will take care of the cleanup. As for repairs, we'll leave that to you." Survival had apparently come with paperwork. Ulzer Medisland received orders to mop up the remaining Aganians, while the 5th Division reclaimed Stronghold Godot, the crucial 3rd Division base. We request the 6th Special Duty Brigade maintain security in the area until reinforcements arrive. I understood the arrangement immediately. We've been played, haven't we, Excellency? Absolutely. Alzur answered. The 5th Division took the prize. We were left holding the danger. I looked up at House Rattray's snake crest and understood why my assignment had suddenly become political. I was Krombertz, a Schwedel officer whose small brigade had been pushed into a war between noble houses. House Rattray is ranked 3rd among the 5 royal houses. Duchess Rattray said, the 5th Division needed the 3rd Division broken before it could claim Stronghold Godot. Could we expose the scheme in time? Duchess Rattray saw the same ugly arithmetic. With a 3rd Division weakened, the 5th Division gets a chance to raise its standing. She said she had me inspect Stronghold Godot with her, and I answered, with all due respect, Colonel. Alzur Medisland's calm reply did not settle me. Something about the order felt wrong. At Stronghold Godot, 5th Division soldiers met us at the gate and ordered us away. Access to the fortress is strictly prohibited, they said. What does this mean? I asked. Their answer was visible behind them. House Rattray was already being pushed aside while the 5th Division took control of the 3rd Division's fort. Duchess Rattray called it a reasonable course of action, and on paper it was. Several 3rd Division officers were killed, and their artillery is gone. She told me taking a fortress with no guns to defend it would require a huge force, while the 5th Division had arrived ready to reinforce it. I saw the logic. I still did not trust it. Duchess Rattray led me toward the western outpost before the takeover could harden into fact. I'm your only escort right now, she said. Then I'll be enough protection. I told her through her telescope I saw Bruges mountain Jaegers still aiming at Stronghold Godot. The army had abandoned the cannon, but someone was coming back for it. One look at the cannon stopped me cold. It's the same model as the 5th Division's siege artillery. I said, are you certain? Duchess Rattray asked. Siege cannons were rare, and this one had no business sitting beneath a 3rd Division banner. I had found the proof in plain sight. Duchess Rattray refused to act on suspicion alone. I want to go and confirm it myself. What do you think? She asked. Before I could answer, my grim Reaper's scythe showed me a severed hand reaching through darkness. My death-sensing saber had never sent harmless visions. I tightened my grip. Danger was already closing in. The warning arrived before the soldiers did. Someone's coming, Duchess Rattray said. It's dangerous. I told her she would not turn back because our allies were there too. Through the trees, I saw cavalry beside the siege cannon, and their uniforms belonged to the 3rd Division. The weapon was real, so was the trap around it. Hannah Hayden hurried after me with my luggage, protesting that leaving her behind while I faced 2 opponents felt completely unfair. I, Krombertz, told her to care for the troops instead, because wounded soldiers needed someone to keep their resolve from collapsing. I'll do my best. Hannah said. My answer was short. Not all. I walked away from Hannah with one rule fixed in my head. The scheme behind this battle had to stay between the colonel and me, because involving the brigade would put them in danger. Then the name beneath my uniform surfaced again. Do they even know who the Reaper truly is? I asked myself. They did not. Duchess Rattray stepped into my path, calm enough to make the corridor feel smaller. She looked at me and said, You played your part well, Grim Reaper Krombertz. That title was useful precisely because it hid the ordinary staff officer I claimed to be. Her smile told me she had already seen through it. I gave Duchess Rattray the only name I could honestly claim. I am Second Lieutenant Krombertz, staff officer. I bear no other name. She seemed amused. Grim Reaper suits you far better. Then her tone sharpened into a threat. But do remember, even the Reaper can die. Duchess Rattray accepted my answer with a soft, almost courteous smile. I'll keep that in mind, Lieutenant. Then she turned beside me and chose her next target. Now let's move to the second one. My eyes widened. A woman who talked that smoothly about killing had already made the decision. Duchess Rattray smiled with her eyes hidden and said, Let's kill plenty, shall we? That was not bravado, it was an instruction dressed as manners. I watched her walk down the hall, and for the first time the danger did not come from an enemy gun. It walked ahead of me. Hannah sat waiting when I arrived, wearing the smile of someone about to deliver bad news politely.
"This is where the real fun begins, isn't it?"
she asked. She explained that Duchess Rattray had arranged a recommendation from the 5th Division.
"First Lieutenant Krombertz."
Hannah said that promotion carried weight, and I knew favors always came with a bill. Hannah laid out the offer plainly.
"Besides being promoted to first lieutenant, you're on the same track as noble officers."
I answered.
"If she's offering, I'll take it. More pay, after all."
Hannah's grin turned wicked.
"Duchess Rattray seems to have taken quite a liking to you."
I could only laugh.
"I also didn't need to know that."
I raised my hand in salute as Duchess Rattray told me, "If your influence grows, that benefits me as well." I was Krombertz, and her confidence could lift me through Schwedel's ranks while binding me tighter to her plans. "I'll be counting on you from here on. If it's for you, Your Excellency, it would be an honor." Then she moved to the second target, House Zichberg. Why did it matter that this house ranked second among the 5 royal houses? A promotion and a noble officer's track sounded useful, but Duchess Rattray had just tied my rise to her own ambitions. The next recap drops daily, so subscribe and it will find you when I learn what that bargain really costs. Duchess Rattray and I held the order between us, and I still could not see what came after being sent against the Empire's second-ranked house. "I don't know," I admitted. "What happens next?" No answer came, but standing still isn't an option. I accepted the order anyway. "If you had to choose, would you take my long-range rifle advantage or Ulzur's command position?"